The president didn't mention me once in last night's correspondence dinner, and he's going to get an email. I'm Charlie Sykes. Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, a crime spree puts UWM on edge. 9 attempted robberies in 48 hours targeting women on campus. A grim week in local sports as both the Brewers and the Bucks lose. The Senate votes to confirm Loretta Lynch as Attorney General, making her the first African-American woman ever to hold that job. A former aide named Marquette Baylor files a formal ethics charge against Tammy Baldwin, accusing the senator of lying and covering up her handling of the Toma VA scandal. Baldwin, in turn, accused Baylor of being a pawn of the vast right-wing conspiracy. And here's a picture of Baylor with a notorious right-winger. But first, we start with a magazine story that brought national attention to the long-running John Doe investigation into whether conservatives might have violated campaign finance laws by coordinating with Scott Walker's recall campaign. The conservative National Review magazine featured a lengthy, detailed article headlined "Wisconsin's Shame" that included detailed accounts of raids into the homes of conservative activists. Here's an excerpt. They came with a battering ram. Cindy Archer, one of the lead architects of Wisconsin's Act 10, was jolted awake by yelling, loud pounding at the door, and her dog's frantic barking. The entire house, the windows and walls, was shaking. She looked outside to see up to a dozen police officers yelling to open the door. They were carrying a battering ram. She wasn't dressed, but she started to run toward the door, her body in full view of the police. Some yelled at her to grab some clothes. Others yelled for her to open the door. I was so afraid, she says, I didn't know what to do. She grabbed some clothes, opened the door, and dressed right in front of the police. The dogs were still frantic. I begged and begged, please don't shoot my dogs. Please don't shoot my dogs. Just don't shoot my dogs. She got the dogs safely out of the house, just as multiple armed agents rushed inside. Some even barged into the bathroom where her partner was in the shower. The officer or agent in charge demanded that Cindy sit on the couch, but she wanted to get up and get a cup of coffee. I told him this is my house and I could do what I wanted. Wrong thing to say. This made the agent in charge furious. He towered over me with his finger in my face and yelled like a drill sergeant that I either do it his way or he would handcuff me. They wouldn't let her speak to a lawyer. She looked outside and saw a person who appeared to be a reporter. Somebody had tipped him off. Cindy Archer was never charged with a crime. A judge later threw out the subpoenas in the case, saying that prosecutors, including Milwaukee District Attorney John Chisholm, were investigating. What they were investigating was not a crime at all. It was protected free speech, and the whole issue now sits before the Wisconsin Supreme Court. So none of this is new, and we're going to talk about this in just a moment. Joining me on our panel this morning, defense attorney Dan Adams, former state representative Michelle Litjens, Susie Falk of the Falk Group, and the managing editor of rightwisconsin.com, Collin Roth. Okay, as I said before, this is not new. Why is it generating so much national attention right now?
Because it brings a human face and a very vivid account to what has been kind of a First Amendment campaign finance story, something that has been a little bit in the weeds for a lot of people. But to hear an account of battering rams and pre-dawn raids and just the human details of the story, of people in the shower, of people wanting to get a cup of coffee in their own homes, fear for their dogs, this is very, very vivid, and it brings this issue to light.
Okay, Susie Falk.
Well, my thought is that, honestly, there's been an escalation in the militarization of law enforcement, and this is just another example of it. It happens to be, it was in suburbia, white, middle-class people. You know, but, I read the Cato Institute, 40,000 of these mid-dawn, pre-dawn raids happen every year, and oftentimes at the wrong address. So this is not new, folks.
Well, but it's new in the sense this is a campaign finance violation. These are not drug dealers. This is not a terrorist thing. This is the question of whether or not you had conservatives who coordinated with a conservative candidate. Isn't this the kind of thing that you handle by mail, Dan Adams, as opposed to battering rams?
Evidently not in John Chisholm's world, but I'm intrigued by the timing, actually, why the national media now has come out and done this narrative. And I think it's, it could be problematic, this story of investigation for Scott Walker long term. And so they're trying to front load and pre-spin the issue now so that somebody can't use it as a campaign issue.
Well, but I think that's been out there. I mean, I think that the reason, though, and and I was really struck by the number of commentators who said, how could we not know that this was going on? How can this happen in America? And I do think it's one of those reminders to those of us in the media how compelling the story is, that until now you haven't had the actual targets of the investigation or people involved telling their first-person story.
But you couldn't tell that story because they had a gag order on them, right? I actually think this is going to play to the benefit of Scott Walker because once again he's being attacked by the establishment. But you read these stories of officers going into children's bedrooms, waking up these kids, you know, trying to get yourself dressed in the morning in front of these police officers. And you don't believe this can happen in our country. You believe there is justice. You believe you can call your attorney. You can tell your neighbors what's going on. They think that your home is being invaded because of you're selling arms or drugs or whatnot. And this is purely because you're supporting Scott Walker.
And again, that's part of the irony of this story is that you get the kids who are involved in this, but they're told you can't tell anybody. So they seize the kids' computers, but then with their homework on it. But then when the teacher or anybody else asks, well, where's your homework? They can't say what happened. They have to make up a story. And this is all about, again, you know, engaging in political speech. You know, for those of us who've been talking about this for some time, you know, that's part of the most outrageous part about this, is that all of this is about a political dispute. It is launched by a Democratic DA, launched on conservatives, and yet there has been almost no blowback from local media or the other First Amendment advocates about what this involves. Collin Roth, you've talked about this.
This is an amazing scene, and it perfectly encapsulates what's happening with legacy and traditional media, in which this story has been right in front of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel for some time, but they have pursued one side of that story. They've pursued a lot of the campaign finance questions, and their editorial board has even cheerleaded this investigation, calling it legitimate at times. They have never once weighed in on whether the victims were abused in any way.
And of course, but when there's a leak from this secret investigation, that might be banner headline, but nothing so far, at least as of this taping, about this story. What is your glass half full? What is your glass half empty this week? Let's go around the table. Dan Adams, you're first.
Charlie, my glass is half full because Wisconsin students are currently taking our new state test, the Badger exam, which will objectively measure how kids are actually doing in our schools. We can't have accountable schools without accurate measurements. My glass is half empty because the test rollout has been terrible. Parents can't make good choices about education without good information. So lawmakers should focus on fixing the exam regime rather than throwing out the entire project.
Michelle Litjens.
My glass is half empty because Saturday was Tax Freedom Day in Wisconsin, which means all of the money we've earned this year went to fund government. It is half full because we can trust our Republican legislators won't raise taxes in this budget, which would make Tax Freedom Day even later.
Susie Falk.
Sure, my glass is half full because last week's Young Professionals Week, hosted by Milwaukee, helped engage more than 5,000 people through a host of activities designed to showcase the awesome city that Milwaukee is. Studies show that millennials will relocate to a city just because it's cool, even if they don't have a job. Milwaukee wants Milwaukee to become such a destination, as do thousands of employers looking to hire young, talented professionals. The success of last week's proves that Milwaukee's cool and that people are paying attention, and I, as an employer, am encouraged by the good work that Milwaukee is doing to help slow down the brain drain. My glass is half empty because while it's great to be a young professional in Milwaukee today, I have come to the sad realization that I am not one.
Collin.
My glass is half full because a bill made it to Governor Walker's desk this week that will require the UW system to document which high schools are churning out students who need to take remedial courses in college. It's half empty because I suspect that we might find out that some of the schools we might think of as good might not be all that good.
Well, my glass is half full because Mayor Tom Barrett assures us over and over again that Milwaukee is a safe city. It's half empty because it's not. Just ask the women around UWM who were robbed last week. Next on Sunday Insight, protecting American workers or anti-free market? Governor Scott Walker's latest comments on immigration reform. Another shift on immigration by Governor Scott Walker. Walker said last week that in addition to cracking down on illegal immigration, he might support limits on legal immigration to make sure the wages and jobs of Americans were being protected. Well, some on the right praised him for putting American workers first. Other critics suggested that he was taking a protectionist, anti-free market position, one that was at odds with his previous positions on the immigration issue. Why is he doing this, do you think, Michelle Litjens?
You know, well, we are a nation of immigrants, right? And first we have to take care of the illegal immigration problem first. But you can kind of see where he's coming from. It might be protectionist, but if you want to raise the wages of your lower income workers, you need to make sure that they all have jobs and that they're not constantly being replaced by low income illegal employees.
I'm a little puzzled because I've always made a distinction between illegal immigration and legal immigration. We are a nation of immigrants. We would not have an atomic bomb in this country if we didn't have legal immigration. Why do you think he made this move?
This was a very bizarre move. He's supposed to be all about the free flow of labor. That was the right to work legislation. And here he goes against the consensus of kind of Main Street and pro-business Republicans to say, no, we actually have to stop letting in smart, highly skilled workers into our country.
Is that what he's saying, the smart, highly skilled, or is he talking about the low-skilled workers?
Those are the people that are coming in legally right now.
As well. Okay, so Collin Roth, did he move to the right in order to get an advantage in the early primaries, and how does this work?
Yeah, I thought this was a bit of a pander, to be honest, and it's something that there is poll around 40% will say that they actually support a decrease in legal immigration. That's actually a plurality. So there is something to it, and I think he's tapping into something, kind of this anxiety among working class folks, where wages have been flat. But I don't think it's a good thing in the long run, and it's not good policy.
I think he's following Marco Rubio's lead. Look at Marco Rubio. He was all about immigration reform for a while, and then he went absolutely silent on it. And, Marco Rubio's saying there are bigger issues to focus on. I think Scott Walker's saying, and you're allowed to change your opinion based on the facts, and I think he's pandering to the Tea Party.
Well, but the Marco Rubio, though, represents that American dream, the immigrant dream. My father came here and all of that. So in a way, he's going very opposite of the kind of appeal.
But Rubio backed away from it, and he said that the bill that he helped champion through with the Gang of Eight wasn't good. But that has to do with illegal immigration. And again, these polls that show that we would like to see less immigration, I wonder whether they confuse it. The reality is that in terms of the dynamism of this country, we want the best and the brightest to come here. You go to the major universities and go into the science, technology graduate schools, and they are stocked with really the best and the brightest of the world who are bringing their talents here, which is a good thing.
That is. And I think when we heard this from one interview, so I think he hasn't really clarified exactly what he meant when he made that statement. I think we really are focusing far more on the illegal immigrants than we are on the higher end.
By the way, I think the key word was clarify. I really want him to clarify what his position is. You may not want to hear it, but we will tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Dan Adams, you're first.
My advice is for state and local leaders. The public is demanding accountability for police. Take a deliberate approach to making sure all Wisconsin police officers are equipped with vest cameras. There are no excuses to slow walk this reform.
Michelle Litjens.
Mr. President, please do something about the Christian genocide that's taking place in the Middle East.
Susie Falk.
To those of us in Milwaukee who ever complained about the weather and the rain this time of the year, my advice is appreciate every little drop of water that falls from the sky. And if you own a garden or a yard or visit a park, revel in the lushness of the spring and be glad you don't live in California, where the drought, which started in 2012, is expected to continue for years, and landowners know that the grass truly is greener on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, I'm going to work on that. Collin Roth.
My advice is for the UW Board of Regents. If you wanted the legislature to restore at least a portion of the budget cuts, perhaps you could have avoided a reckless hike in tuition and embraced the reforms. Now you're going to have to swallow the cuts and lose the autonomy.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, my unsolicited advice is for legislative Republicans. Repeal prevailing wage. It is a sleazy, anti-taxpayer law that represents the worst of corporate welfare, and it costs taxpayers $300 million a year. There's absolutely no excuse to keep it. Next on Sunday Insight, when will they stop talking and reach a deal on a new arena for downtown Milwaukee? Deal or no deal? High-level talks, but no firm deal for a Bucks arena in downtown Milwaukee, and the clock is running on the $500 million arena. State officials met with the mayor and the county executive twice last week to try to work out what looks to be a complex financing scheme. So far, no white smoke. Any sense of where we're at here?
This week was really slow in terms of actual news as to where the arena deal is going, which may be a good thing. That may mean that
it's not a good thing.
The policymakers and the business owners are actually in the room pounding out some details, and that they don't want us in the media to prematurely come out and spike their deal.
Or it means that they can't come up with a deal because every day that passes without positive forward progress is bad for this deal.
But previously they were coming out and pointing fingers, and this week they haven't been doing that.
Okay, so. Susie Falk.
Well, yeah, I mean, you saw them come out of the meeting and they all looked level-headed. Mayor Barrett addressed the television cameras and said that progress is being made. I know it's a little slow to come, but look what happened with Miller Park 2 years ago. It took some time to
This
get
is
through financing.
completely different than Miller Park because you had a governor that was all in on this. You had legislators who were passionately in favor of this. I'm trying to think of one Democrat in Milwaukee County, one elected Democrat who has come out in favor of this project.
They don't want to spike it either because they don't want to say to their outstate GOP colleagues, hey, we're for this and have the initial
I'm just wondering,
reaction.
where is the political support for this?
It's not outstate Wisconsin, right? And you're asking outstate Republicans to care more about this issue than Democrats representing the city of Milwaukee. I think worse, you're expecting outstate Republicans to care more than Tom Barrett, the mayor of the city of Milwaukee. They need a cheerleader for this arena. They need someone out there selling it, someone talking to the talk radio shows, in the newspaper saying we need buy-in and we need Mayor Barrett.
I mean, somebody who was close to the negotiation said, yeah, Mayor Barrett is obviously bringing his F game to all of this, and I don't know how long this can go on before this thing falls apart.
Yeah, I've said this before. I think there's never been a real public face to cheerlead this issue. I agree with Michelle there. But at the same time, I think you're going to see an increase in pressure among legislative Republicans, people like Senator Noss, who want a separate vote on this outside of the budget. That changes the calculus too.
Again, the Miller Park thing is an interesting analogy because that was hard and that left a lot of political blood on the ground. But also, the fan base for the Brewers is so much larger than the Bucks, and I don't mean to be negative on this, but with the playoff run, you have the Bucks in the playoffs. The buzz just was not there, and I think it kind of underlined how difficult a sale this is going to be.
And the champion issue is important too. I mean, Governor Thompson years ago, back to that, he was the champion for Miller Park, and it is too bad we don't have a champion. It's not too late for the public to get involved. Pick up your phone, start writing blogs.
If the public gets involved, this thing is really in trouble because I mean, I'm seriously. So, what is it you don't get? Let's go around the table. Dan Adams, you're first.
I don't get how reforming the John Doe law is the only criminal justice issue being discussed in Madison. How about making reforms to ensure that every Wisconsinite has real protection from government abuse? I suggest bringing back real preliminary hearings.
Michelle Litjens.
What I don't get is why do liberals always ask for more laws, like gun laws, to curb violence instead of actually doing something to stop the problem, like putting heat on the prosecutors and judges to lock away the criminals?
Susie Falk.
Yeah, I don't get how the gyrocopter, whatever you call it, bigger than a drone, flown by a U.S. postal worker, made it through the restricted airspace and onto the Capitol lawn, and why the FAA and NORAD and Park Police were no-shows at the closed-door hearings with members of the House Oversight Committee this week, and why on earth Homeland Security Secretary Johnson would admit he had no clue what a gyrocopter was. He's paid to be aware of flying threats to our nation's security.
You would think. Collin Roth.
Yeah, what I don't get is how any Republican who claims to look out for the interests of taxpayers could oppose a repeal of the prevailing wage. The antiquated law is costing communities, and if you oppose it, perhaps it should cost you your job.
Well, Hillary Clinton now says that deep-seated religious beliefs will have to change for women to get their full abortion rights. What I don't get is, how does Hillary propose to make people change those religious beliefs? And what happens if they don't? Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. But first, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Dan Adams, you're first.
My winner is Megan Holman, who just announced her challenge to Southside Milwaukee Alderman Tony Zielinski this week. I'm always a fan of contested elections, and this Bayview race will be very interesting to watch. My losers, GOP senators who voted to change current law in the state, which prohibits buyers from taking a handgun from the store until 48 hours after a background check is started, because a law-abiding citizen can't wait 48 hours for a pistol. Really?
Michelle Litjens.
My winner is Senator Ron Johnson. Knowing that a full repeal of Obamacare isn't realistic with a Democrat as president, he crafted legislation that would make Obamacare more palatable, and it just might get signed by the president. My losers are Hillary Clinton, Eric Holder, and the president, and a dozen of his cabinet members who allowed Russia to buy 20% of the United States uranium reserves.
Susie Falk.
My winners, the business community. Recent surveys by both the National Association for Business Economics and the MMAC are showing positive trends, including more growth in consumer spending this year over last, and expected profit gains and employment growth. My losers, the bright-eyed seniors who I had the pleasure of speaking to at UW-Madison this past week, who, despite the growing number of new jobs, are strapped with enormous amounts of student loan debt as they enter the workforce.
Collin Roth.
My winner this week is David French of National Review for giving voice and elevating the stories of Wisconsin activists abused by the John Doe investigation. This has been long overdue. My losers are Democrats who have spent the better part of 6 years clearing the field for Hillary Clinton. How's that looking right about now?
Well, my loser, Milwaukee County District Attorney John Chisholm, thanks to that National Review article about his handling of the John Doe probe. Chisholm has become the public face of overreaching, vindictive, unconstitutional prosecutorial abuse. Winner, Milwaukee sports fans, because it can't get any worse, right? Right? Thanks for joining us and joining for my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.